Today's conversation is sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you want to learn more about how to make your 9-to-5 optional, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.
You're listening to the Going Long podcast, the #1 podcast for the strategies, tactics, and actions high wage earners need for living an intentionally designed life of wealth and resilience.
Welcome to the Going Long podcast. We're back once again to continue to help to educate you so you feel much more comfortable as well as confident in being able to build the wealthy and resilient life that you're looking to lead and be able to do that so much faster. And you know what? It gives me great pleasure to welcome you back. I'm your host, Billy Keels. And wow, today is another one of our brief solo episodes, of course. And before we even get into it, just want to say, first and foremost, thanks to each and every one of you that continue to download the podcast, continues to keep the podcast in the top 1.5% of podcasts all over the globe, which is amazing. Really appreciate that from you, and also for continuing to tag us on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And it just means the world to us. And if you want to leave your honest written review or a rating, you can do that. And we've got a nice little video, tell you exactly how to do it on the Apple Podcast platform. So with that, also too, if you want to hear over any one of the more than 425 episodes, well over that at this point in time, just go to billykeels.com/podcast. Once again, it's billykeels.com/podcast. So, one of the things that continues to come up, and as you know, I'm having calls with people that are interested in learning more about the advisory services that we have here at Billy Keels Advisory Services. And there's this thing that comes up, and it's something that I used to live, and I dreaded it for quite a long time. It was one of the things that was, especially as a high performer, when you're a high performer, you are consistently overachieving. And when you overachieve, you want people to know, you want to share your best practices. You want other people to be able to draft and be able to do something similar, maybe not exactly the same. This is just one of those things for high achievers. You want people to almost emulate and do exactly what you want to do. And at the same time, you want to be able to know that you are part of someone else's growth. Well, that's in the normal 9-to-5 constructs. Well, when you start creating or realizing that you want to create your own life, you want to control your own time, you want to be able to grow and get into a point where you are growing, and this cycle of growth is happening thanks to the structure that you put in place, thanks to the business model that you've created for your side gig, right? Because a lot of you know that I'd spent about a decade performing really, really high in my 9-to-5 job. It was a well into 6-figure salary and bonus checks and all this other kind of stuff, which made it very financially lucrative. And at the same time that growth was happening, I realized that I wanted to have more control over my time. I wanted to be able to own the outcomes of my life. I didn't want to have to work constantly more and more and more and more hours. And even though I was in sales and sales leadership, one of the things that I realized was, hey, listen, I want to continue to grow. And as I did that in the corporate job, what I started to find out really quickly was it wasn't working exactly the same when it came to my side hustle. Well, what do I mean by that? Because if I go back to where I was, this is a point in my life where I was probably around 38, 39 years old. I'd managed a business that was $100 million. I did that across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I knew that I wanted to continue to grow, but I realized that I didn't want to do it in the corporate constructs anymore. I liked my corporate job, but I wanted to have more control. I'd been studying this real estate stuff. I was watching a bunch of videos. I was listening to a bunch of podcasts. I actually started taking some action. I got part of groups that I was becoming a part of online. This is, back in the 2010s, something like that. And anyway, so I got to this point where I was becoming a theoretical master, and I started to have some very early success. I was making some money. I was making more and more money. And at the same time, this was in my side gig. So I was building a 5-figure business on the side. And I'd also gotten to the point where we were almost just at 6 figures. And at the same time, I was performing highly in my day job. I'd done a bonus check that was for a 90-day period. It was well into mid 6 figures. Well, maybe a little bit less than mid 6 figures, but in a 90-day period. So, life was good. Financially was going well. Life at home was well. Kids were young and was able to travel during the week or on the weekend or during the week, and then with the family on the weekends. And life was really, really going pretty well. And it was at a point in my life where I was really focused on, I wanted to make more money. I wanted to make more money. I wanted to make more money. And that's what I was basically telling everyone, even, close friends, my wife at the time. And I was really, really wanting to make a lot of money. Well, secretly inside, what I really wanted was like to be in a position where my kids were admiring me. My wife at the time was admiring me. That people would be like, "Hey, look, he said he was going to do this, and I was actually doing it." I was someone who was like admired. Like that's what I was really, really, truly craving for. And so as I started, like, and got into this spot, I realized that something was going to give, right? Something was going to give. So I had been fortunate enough that I was doing this real estate thing. It was making money. And this was going to be my vehicle to be able to say, corporate really, really liked you. It was a wonderful time. At the same time, this real estate and investing and stuff is going to really get me out of it, because I also started finding out about this thing called syndication, where syndication would make the real estate deals even bigger. And being able to be bigger, I would be able to leverage a lot of the same kind of structure, the same kind of like really process driven, bigger type of opportunities that I was used to working with in the corporate, right? Because when I was in the corporate, my last 16 years, at least, I was working with Fortune 500 CEOs and top level execs for companies that were doing multi-billions of dollars in revenue. And so it was just like a natural transition for me to be able to say, okay, well, let's do something bigger. I wanted not just buy a duplex or a quadplex, like I wanted to buy hundreds of units, was investing with other people. And I realized that this syndication thing would be one of the vehicles to be able to say, hey, look, I'm going to move on and use this vehicle. And so that's when I started doubling down. I really started looking at, okay, how do I make this more into a process structured type of a business? And so that's also too when I decided, hey, look, it's time for me to go out and invest in guided action. I was out there. I got myself a coach. My coach helped me to really stop like spinning my wheels, because at a certain point I also felt like I was really spinning my wheels. Like I really liked my day job, but the thing on the side was taking a lot more energy and time. Although I liked it and it was giving me energy, like I was just all over the place because money was coming in, but I didn't have any process. I didn't have any team in place. I didn't have anything. So I was just like really exhausted mentally, physically, because I was burning the proverbial candle at both ends. And so then I got to this certain point where I was like, look, I'm not moving fast enough. I'm not feeling like I'm at a point where I'm performing really well at home, or I had feelings of inadequacy when I was at the office, but I had all this money. So I was like, well, I'm not doing the things that I should actually be doing. I wasn't deploying the resources. I wasn't putting the structure around me. And so I realized that one of the things that was happening was I was afraid to really talk about what was happening, because these early successes, when things were going really, really well, that was the time when in my day job, I would have been sharing the best practice. I would have been sharing what was going on. But because of the way that my side business was growing, and it was a way that I knew that I would be able to get away, like all of a sudden, like kind of this imposter syndrome started creeping in. And what do I mean by that? First of all, like I started watching people that had hundreds and thousands of units, and I didn't have that. And I also started realizing that the units that I did have, they were kicking off enough cash and creating enough positive momentum that I couldn't tell anybody at the office, because I thought, you know what, if I tell people at the office what's really happening outside of the office, all of a sudden there's going to be more scrutiny. People are going to be watching me more. I was really, really afraid of what my bosses may say if they found out that I was actually doing something outside of the normal 9 to 5. Because remember, I was like a really high paid, highly visible executive in a enterprise software company, which is like, you don't do anything other than that because you get paid so well, you make so much bonus money. And, I also kept doing what I was doing. And I was also afraid, like, hey, listen, what happens if I keep doing this on the side? Like, are my colleagues going to start thinking differently? Or will they start looking at me like, are people going to think, well, Billy's slipping because he's taking his eye off the ball and he's actually doing this other thing? So it started giving me all of this anxiety. I felt like, people would judge me because I was missing a beat, or whatever the case may be. Well, I realized that a lot of that was because I didn't have structure. I didn't have process. I was completely inefficient in the way that I was actually operating outside of the 9 to 5. The perception was I was operating really, really well because I kept bringing in the sales number during the 9 to 5s. But outside of it, I was like in a tailspin because I was dying from my own success. But the fact that I didn't want to tell other people like I would normally do in my 9 to 5, when I was sharing the best practice during the 9 to 5, like how other people could follow my trails, because I was so afraid of being judged, for the successes that I was having outside of the 9 to 5, I realized that it was really holding me back because I wasn't telling, I wasn't sharing, I was keeping it a secret. And that whole reason that I was keeping it a secret is I was afraid of being judged by anybody and everybody. Like I said, the bosses, coworkers, sometimes clients. I was afraid that they would find out. And at the same time, I knew it eventually that someone would have to find out, because if not, I was going to be stuck in my job, in my corporate job forever. Now, keep in mind, I liked my job. I really liked my job. And at the same time, I didn't want to be stuck in it. Like I didn't have any options. So I was really working hard to make sure that I did get the options. Now, eventually I got to a point where I became okay with sharing what I was doing outside. I started playing around a little bit on Facebook. I started playing a little bit on LinkedIn. I would do these videos at the airport. Eventually I started playing on other social media sites. I started sharing with my boss at the time. I think I talked about that. Actually, I know I talked about that. It was in one of the previous episodes when I started talking about, I just was looking for the episode. Actually, I can't remember the episode, but I was talking about how important it was to be able to share that with my boss. And when I did share it with my boss, I realized like, hey, look, this is something that's important. I'm getting distracted. I'm really falling in love with this kind of side hustle thing that I've got going on. So, yeah. So it took me a decade. It took me over a decade to finally get to a point where it's time to share. I needed to let other people know. I wanted to grow. I wanted to get into that area of syndication to be able to use a lot of the skill set that I had put together during my 9 to 5 as I was working with really large enterprises. And so, like I said, it took over eight and a half years, almost a decade to get there. But most importantly, I realized that when I was able to finally face up and not fear the judgment of others, that's when I really leaned in. That's when my growth, not only outside of the company, started happening, but then I was also in the company, like kept being a part of the top talent program, was able to be a better employee for other people. And I started realizing that my sons were like, Dad, what are you doing? We see you on the internet. And I felt like this whole like feeling of, yeah, my sons are admiring the things that I'm doing and I'm feeling accomplished because I'm moving forward. I'm moving faster. And the structure that I was looking for was in place. I started becoming much more efficient in the things that I was doing outside of the office, as well as what I was doing inside of the office. It all came together. And so then I stopped fearing that whole point of being judged. It wasn't going slow anymore. Actually, I started to lean into it. I started going faster, started gaining more growth. And I'm sure that it's a very similar thing that you will find. Once you get over the fear of being judged, you will definitely grow and grow faster, because fear of being judged is one of those things that just really, really hold you back. It stunts your growth. It stunted my growth for a really long time. Then I started leaning into it and things got much, much better. So I don't know who needs to know this, who needs to hear this today as you're listening. Maybe you're driving or maybe you're on the treadmill, you're walking. And if any of this resonates with you, well, listen, I've been there, done that. Like I said, took over almost a decade to be able to do it, but it was done. And I know you can get there. I know you can do it. Take today's episode, listen to it again. Think about the things that are relevant for you. And heck, if you know somebody who's been in this situation, or you were just recently talking about it, share today's episode with them. Hopefully they're going to take some insights. They can know what they need to do, getting over those fears of being judged by others, leaning into the desire to have more structure, be able to gain more efficiencies. And as you gain those efficiencies, be able to feel more confident, being able to get the momentum moving forward, and get over the fear of being judged. So listen, while you're sharing today's episode, I'm going to be back here preparing for the very next episode. So until then, go ahead and make it a great day. And thank you very much. Freedom! Today's conversation was sponsored by the Billy Keels Advisory Program. If you're looking to make your 9 to 5 optional and need some help, just go to billykeels.com/advising. Once again, that's billykeels.com/advising.